Today, we'll hear a story about a man whose wife cheated on him. John was taken aback when his wife Diana paused during their conversation and looked at him. He replied, "I understand," thinking he had said those words too many times in the past few days. He was exhausted from repeating himself. He wondered how they had reached this point in their marriage. They had been married for over 22 years, had 2 wonderful children in college, and lived in a beautiful old house that Diana inherited from her grandmother. They had updated the house, adding a pool and a detached garage, and it now had an open concept floor plan and a beautifully updated kitchen. They also owned a beach house in Hatteras, North Carolina, which John preferred to leave as it was, filled with wonderful family memories. John was now the senior vice president of central logistics, and Diana was a senior account manager at Richards & Son, where she had worked for the past 20 years. They had a perfect home, almost perfect children, wonderful careers, and what John thought was a happy marriage. But recently, he found himself saying "I understand" a lot, even though he didn't really understand what was happening. Diana fell silent and looked at him. "You understand what I'm trying to say?" "I understand," he replied, hoping she didn't notice the mark he made on the paper in front of him. He had said "I understand" to his wife 32 times in the past 2 days. "It's time to end this debate," Diana said finally. "So, we finally agree," she added. "I'm going to step outside of our marriage once to experience this." John looked her in the eye and replied, "I will never cheat on you, and I will not agree for you to cheat on me." Despite Diana's insistence that he had cheated on her, John maintained that he had never been unfaithful. He was willing to forgive her for her deception up to this point, but now that was all. He knew about her plans to meet David Summers at the Jefferson Hotel, and he knew about the new dress and underwear she had bought for the occasion. He offered her 2 options: to go with him to the beach house and discuss their problems, or to continue with her plans and end their marriage. As Diana sat motionless, John left the room. He went to their bedroom, brushed his teeth, and tried to sleep, but he knew it would be difficult. Diana finally moved to the sofa, took her phone, and called her friend Janice. She told Janice that John knew everything about her plans with David. Janice pleaded with her to cancel her plans and apologize to John, but Diana was unsure. The next morning, they both got up and went about their morning routine without saying a word to each other. John checked the list in his hands and realized that today was Monday. He took time off from work and walked through every room in the house, photographing each room and its contents. He cataloged the contents of each room and noted the items he wanted to keep. He copied all their wedding and family photos from the cloud onto a flash drive and left their wedding album on the coffee table. He looked at the apartments he had seen, but he knew he would miss this house and the woman he couldn't stop loving. John went to meet Sandra Lewis, who came highly recommended to him. The settlement she offered was simple and straightforward. Diana would get the house and her retirement plan, and John would keep the beach house and his pension plan. He would pay off her car and all her credit cards, and a portion of their investment accounts would be set aside for college tuition and an endowment fund for each child. Then they would split the remaining funds 50-50ths. John simply nodded his head in agreement. John headed to the bank and opened a separate account, transferring half of the old account to his new one. He emailed the direct deposit change form to his company's HR department, and later at home, he would change his payments to his new bank account. He then went to their investment banker and confirmed that both of their signatures would be required for all invoices and transfers. John informed him that his lawyer Sandra Lewis would seize the accounts the day after Diana was served. As John went about his day, he realized that he had said very few words to Sandra since he hired her for his divorce. All their communication was carried out via email. He sensed sadness and resignation in her and sometimes wondered why she chose family law as her specialty. He was disgusted by the expression of pity and concern on the faces of his longtime advisors and realized that they were just the first of many of their acquaintances who would have the same expression on their faces when the news came out. The thought of having to tell his children about the divorce almost made him sick. Diana tried to avoid David Summers at work as much as possible. At lunchtime, they met at Maria's Cafe, a small restaurant that he liked to call their place. She was quiet and refused to hold his hand. John knew about their every move, and she couldn't shake the feeling she had all day that they were being watched. David paid no attention to Diana's mood and talked excitedly about their plans for the weekend. Diana tried to do some work but kept looking around the office. She realized that at least one and possibly more of her colleagues were acting as spies for John. After a couple of fruitless hours, she closed up for the day and left the office. John completed all the tasks on his list and realized he hadn't eaten all day. He decided to grab a snack at Maria's Cafe. As he sat down at a table, the hostess came out and greeted him with a hug. She told him that Diana and David were there for lunch, but all was not well in paradise. Diana was very nervous, and David seemed clueless. John sighed and wondered how he had gotten to this point in his life. He ordered Maryland crab cakes with broccoli and a beer and tried to enjoy his meal. Diana returned home early and began to put her backup plan into action. She planned to cook John's favorite dinner and try to talk to him again. It was important to her that he agreed to her one-time date, or at least accepted her actions. She went upstairs and changed, wanting to look good for him. She then planned to meet Janice and her other friend Lisa for drinks to discuss the big day one last time on Saturday. She took the Victoria's Secret clothes and bags out of her closet and walked to her car, carefully placing them in the trunk. She didn't want to embarrass either John or herself by exposing them to him. John arrived home at his usual time and was surprised to smell the aroma of dinner being prepared. Diana entered the living room and handed him a bottle of light beer. She asked him to take off his jacket and tie and sit down, as dinner would be on the table in a couple of minutes. John smiled at the Maryland crab cakes and steamed broccoli she brought him. He was glad because this was his favorite dish, but for the first time, he realized that he would prefer to eat at Maria's Cafe at this moment. He would prefer to be anywhere but at home. As they ate dinner in silence, Diana decided to try again to make him understand why she needed to do this. John interrupted her and told her she looked very good today and asked if she was going somewhere. Diana replied that she was going to meet Janice and Lisa for a few drinks later in the evening. John coldly told her that he understood and that he had lost his appetite. He left the table and told her she looked really good for David Summers. He told her to tell him to drop dead for him. John disappeared into the living room, and the sound of the television filled the dining room. Diana sat quietly at the table with her head in her hands. For the first time, she seriously reconsidered her actions. After a few minutes, she stood up and cleared the table. She needed to remain true to her feelings. She wrote to Janice and asked if they could meet earlier. She couldn't wait until tomorrow to see David Summers. John heard the front door open and close. He drank his beer and looked at the TV, realizing that he had been sitting there for 20 minutes and had no idea what channel he was watching. He felt sadness pressing on his chest like a huge weight that made it almost impossible for him to breathe. He pulled a box out of his coat pocket, popped 2 pills into his mouth, and washed them down with the rest of his beer. For the first time in his life, he took sleeping pills. He knew he wouldn't be able to sleep without help, and he also knew that he would need all his strength for Saturday morning. Diana was the first to go to the bar and order a table for 3. While waiting, she turned her attention to the scene in the bar. Men and women danced a dance of seduction, but to Diana, it seemed like a dance of despair and loneliness. Was this really her destiny? The appearance of her friends saved her from these thoughts. Diana watched as Janice and Lisa approached the table. She noticed that they seemed tense and prepared for an attack. Lisa sat down and looked at Diana. "What the hell do you think you're doing? Are you crazy? Are you going to cheat on your husband with some piece of crap from work? Are you going through menopause, or have you started taking pills, or have you fallen and hit your head? This is the dumbest thing I've ever heard from anyone, and I used to think you were one of the smartest people I know." If you go through with it, you must be the dumbest I've ever met. Diana simply answered her friend, "Good evening to you too, Lisa." "Yes, I'm fine, but what about you?" Lisa just looked at her, and Diana saw the anger and pain in her eyes. Diana turned to Janice. "Your turn." Janice shook her head. "You know how I feel about this adventure of yours. I would say more, but I'm afraid I won't be able to be as polite as Lisa." Diana smiled sadly. "You think you could swear better than Lisa?" Janice answered without smiling. "Well, no one can swear better than Lisa," but she left out the words, fallen woman, cheater, adulterer, idiot, and perhaps the worst, disappointment, of all. "But there's one thing I really need to tell you. I think you are planning to make the biggest mistake of your life, but I love you and will be here to help you no matter what you do." Lisa just shook her head. Damn. What you want to do is so wrong and so stupid, but I will be here for you too. Just so you know, I'll be saying, 'I told you so,' over and over again." Diana hugged her friends. "Thank you for your love. I know you can't support what I do, but it's great to know that I can count on you both. After this, you both know that I don't do anything halfway. I have made a commitment, and it is time for me to bring this matter to its natural conclusion." Lisa softly pleaded, "Diana, there is nothing natural about betrayal, and commitment to betrayal is the opposite of the true meaning of the word commitment." Diana sat quietly for several minutes and then stood up and said, "I need to finish my business for tomorrow. I'll bring a bottle of wine. Please stay and drink for me." Diana completed her instructions and drove up to the dark house. She collected her thoughts and then sent Janice a long text message. She knew that Janice was angry with her, but she also knew that her friend would help her. She opened the trunk of her car and realized she couldn't leave her shopping in the car overnight. Tomorrow it would be too cold to wear. She hid them in the closet in the downstairs hallway and then slid into bed next to John and tried to sleep. That night, sleep did not come to Diana. Finally, at 3 a.m., she got out of bed and went downstairs. She saw the wedding album on the coffee table and thought that if John could look at their wedding album, so could she. After looking at 2 pages, she closed the album and began to cry. She had to make him understand. At 5 a.m., she gave up on the idea of sleep and went to the bathroom to take a shower. After her shower, she put on some Victoria's Secret lingerie and then opened her clothes bag and put on the pretty item that was in it. She pulled out the suitcase she had packed earlier and carried it to the car. She then placed the Victoria's Secret bag next to her suitcase. She walked into the kitchen and wrote a short note to John. She chuckled to herself. She was leaving him a "Dear John" letter. She placed the note on the coffee maker, turned off the light, and walked to the car, determined to finish what she started. John woke up and looked at the alarm clock. It was 6:15, and when he turned around, he realized that he was sleeping alone. The thought occurred to him that she had not waited for this evening. He had pushed her towards David Summers. He imagined that she was lying in David Summers' bed, and this picture struck him to the core. For the first time, he overestimated himself. Should he have just let her have one night to test another man? She promised to belong only to him after that one night. Did he really lose his life's happiness because of his ego and pride? Reflecting on his plight, John realized that he would never be able to love her again if she went to David Summers. He could live with her putting her children first because that's what a mother should do, but he could never live with her putting another man before her husband. Over the course of 22 years, they both earned each other's respect and loyalty. She expected nothing less, and he wouldn't accept anything less. He hoped she was home, maybe sleeping in one of the other bedrooms. John checked all the bedrooms and found no sign of her returning home that night. Entering the kitchen, he saw a note on the coffee maker. He opened the letter and read the short note. "Please understand," was all she wrote. John fell back into one of the kitchen chairs and began to cry. He was afraid of this, but deep down in his soul, he still expected that she would stay and forget this crazy idea and remain his wife. He had prepared the coffee and went upstairs. He quickly showered and dressed, then filled a duffel bag with some clothes and went downstairs. John filled his thermos with coffee and headed to the front door, taking one last long look at the house that was his home. He turned off the light and closed the door. The cold morning air hit his face as he walked down the steps. He had forgotten to start the car, but he thought the cold would help him wake up and perhaps snap him out of whatever daze he was feeling. As he walked to his car, he realized that the engine was running. He opened the back door and, as he was putting his bag inside, he saw a suitcase and a Victoria's Secret bag in the back seat. In the passenger seat, he saw Diana sleeping in the car. He quietly closed the back door and paused, reaching for the door handle. He cried tears of joy at the sight of his wife, his love. Now he knew they had a chance. John took a deep breath and opened the car door. As he got into the car, Diana stirred and looked at him. "Good morning," she whispered quietly, rubbing her eyes. "Morning," John replied. After a short pause, he asked, "How long have you been here?" Diana looked at her watch and replied, "About 2 hours. I couldn't sleep, and then I was worried that you would leave without me, so I decided to wait in the car. I gassed up the car and bought us a dozen Krispy Kreme donuts for the road." John opened the box of donuts and said, "There are only 7 donuts here." Diana finally woke up and answered, "There were a dozen between us, and I've already eaten my share." Smiling, John grabbed one of the donuts and let it melt in his mouth. "This will tide me over until we have breakfast at Virginia's diner. What do you think of their country ham and cookies and cream?" Diana shook her head. "I'm not dressed to go to Virginia's diner." John was confused. "Diana, there is no dress code at the Virginia diner. You can wear whatever you want there." Diana smiled. "I know that you can wear almost anything, but you can't not wear almost anything." After she finished speaking, she opened her coat to show John a purple lingerie set. "Well, it's almost nothing," John agreed. "Is the coat new?" Diana replied, "Yes, I exchanged my dress for this magnificent coat. In case you didn't check out the Victoria's Secret bag, I returned those other lingerie items and bought these items especially for you." Diana put her hand on his chin and lifted his head so that he looked into her eyes. "This outfit and the body underneath are meant for your eyes and your eyes only for all the days and nights of our lives." After a short pause, she continued, "I'm sorry for the hell I've put you through these past months. You were right about almost everything. There were only 2 things you were wrong about. Last night, I got dressed for you and no one else, and I actually met Janice and Lisa. The second thing you were wrong about was that when we had a night, I had intimate with David. David never came into our bedroom. I didn't close my eyes to think about him, but I couldn't look you in the eyes because I was so ashamed of what I wanted to do. I'm ashamed to admit that the shame I felt didn't stop me from planning to be with him." She looked at him and said quietly, "Now I really understand." He kissed her. They had a lot to talk about, and they had a lot of work ahead of them to repair their marriage. But his heart leapt with joy when he realized that she finally understood. As John drove past the Virginia diner, he looked at Diana. She fell asleep again soon after they reached the highway. He remembered everything he did on Friday. They had a lot to talk about, and he knew that any honest conversation had to include his confession. John remembered that evening 7 years ago when he was in San Francisco for the quarterly corporate meeting. At that time, he was the head of the department, and his adventure brought huge results to the company. Foreign companies were buying up their American competitors, but John saw an interesting opportunity. He advocated the idea of buying an Italian company with excellent engineers but serious financial problems. His mentor, the CEO, approved the purchase, and it was a great success. The purchase brought them several teams of experienced engineers, and the big plus was the access to the European market that this company provided to the rest of the corporation and the presence of the Italian company in the Chinese market. The deal ultimately brought in billions of dollars. This was the crowning achievement of the CEO's career and set John on the fast track to a corporate career. That evening, Diana was home in Virginia with the boys at a school band concert, so John celebrated his success with his colleagues and especially with Debbie Maris, a wonderful marketing representative from another division. Debbie and he had a long-term business relationship of the friendly type. He drank just enough to ease his inhibitions but not enough to cloud his judgment. They danced much closer than a married man should with someone other than his wife. They headed to her room, but for the first time in hours, he thought about his wife and the wonderful family he had at home. He looked at the beautiful Debbie Maris and couldn't think of a single reason to enter the room. He took 2 steps back and then ran, literally ran, back to the elevator. He went into his room and took a shower, wanting to get rid of Debbie's smell. It was 1 o'clock in the morning in their house in Richmond, but he called Diana. He needed to hear her voice. After several rings, she sleepily picked up the phone. John assured Diana that he was fine and nothing bad had happened. Then he told her the good news. He told her about the success of his adventure and his promotion with a huge increase in salary. He cried as she excitedly told him how proud she was of him and how she always knew he would succeed. She told him how much she loved him. Through his tears, he realized that he had almost shared one of the greatest moments of his life with the wrong woman. Diana's opinion and happiness were all that mattered to him. When John drove to the beach, he knew he had to tell her. He had to make her understand why he truly understood her feelings. He was in her shoes, and that was why he could listen to her and honestly say, "I understand." David Summers was alone in Fred Davis's office at Richards & Sons. Fred was the vice president of human resources, and David was sent to his office as soon as he walked in that Monday morning. He didn't understand why he was there. Okay, he'd recently missed a couple of deadlines in his pursuit of Diana, but he felt like he could catch up quickly. The meeting confused his plans for this morning. He needed to talk to Diana about what happened over the weekend. Not only did she set him up, but she also sent 2 of her friends, Janice and Lisa, to tell him about it. David remembered how afraid he was of this woman, Lisa. His father served in the Navy for 25 years, but he couldn't hold a candle to the way this woman could swear. She embarrassed him right there in the lobby of the Jefferson Hotel. He recalled that even the hotel security seemed afraid to interfere. As he turned to return to his seat, he froze when he saw the photograph on Fred Davis's desk. It was a family portrait of Fred, his 3 sons, and his smiling wife. Now he knew the name of the woman who had scolded him so thoroughly. Lisa Davis. Now he understood why he was here. What would you do in the situation our protagonist finds himself in? Would you do the same thing he did? Write your opinion in the comments. See you in the next video.